Hello, everyone. I'm Steve with Steve Talks About Books and Stuff. I'm here with Rello Reads and our friend Miles Hurt, the author of Red Harvest Moon. Miles, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me.
And congratulations on Red Harvest Moon. It looks like the reception's been really positive. And what does it feel like to finally have your book out there?
It feels fantastic, actually. It takes a fair while to write a book, so to have it finished and out in the world and having people reading it's been fantastic, actually. So it's been really pleasing to hear some of the early responses and people connecting with it. And I couldn't be happier. It's really good.
Awesome. So how long did it take you to write Red Harvest Moon?
In a way, it took my whole life, really, but I'd say probably about 2.5 years. It's a bit tricky for me because I work full time, so I have to write in the evening and on the weekends and on holidays and so forth. So I squeeze in writing where I can. So it's taken me about 2.5 years from start to finish to get it done. So yeah, about that long, I'd say. Yeah.
Nice. So do you have the series planned out, or are you just kind of going book by book?
It's a bit tricky to say. I've got an end worked out. Let's put it that way. So I know that there's a lot of fantasy authors I feel that there's a lot of fantasy authors that maybe don't have the end worked out. So I think it's fairly important for me to know where I want to go with this. I'm looking at about 7 books. So 7 times 2.5 years. No, hopefully I can get the next ones done a bit quicker. But I do have an end worked out. But even in writing a short story, you'll have your end worked out, but you won't actually use that ending, if you know what I mean. So it's just your sort of ideal destination, but creativity being what it is, it's not definite that I'll use that ending. So.
With the initial reaction that you got from this book, like my reaction and a couple of reactions you already got, did it change anything in the future sequels by any chance?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably. I'd say so. But I think that's it's always going to happen. There's going to be feedback coming in, and it's probably already. So I've already started writing the next one in the series, and some of the feedback that I've received it just plays on your mind, obviously, because if you read a review and somebody makes a really good observation, you sort of think to yourself, okay, I can twiddle the knobs, so to speak, and include some of that information. So Steve, for example, had a great observation about more character moments, and my partner read the book as well, and she made the same observation. So, next book we'll have some more character observations. So unfortunately, Red Harvest Moon is set in stone now. So that's part of when you're writing a long series and you have to sort of bring one out, if from now on, if I have another great idea that I can't use because of what's happened in Red Harvest Moon, I just have to suck it up from this point on. But yeah, absolutely. I listen to feedback, and it's really great to have had that, because for 2.5 years, I've just been writing in a vacuum, really, and just in my own head, and to have people give me feedback about what they liked and the things that I made conscious choices about to put in there that they've picked up on and said, "Oh, this is good," or maybe this was a problem. Mm-hmm. It's quite gratifying to have made an effort to put something in the book that a reviewer has picked up on. It's really great. Yeah. So yeah, that's right.
I mentioned in my review, but one thing that really stuck out to me is the way you described environments, because I felt like I was there. Mm-hmm. I felt like I could see, like I was in the world. It wasn't like I was looking at it from, I was there walking in the village and seeing the people and the buildings. And so I thought that was really, really well done.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. And that's probably why it takes so long to get the book done, because to get that to work, it's fairly labor intensive. So I have to basically write a sentence and then imagine what's the visual impression that someone's getting from that, and then what's the next visual impression, and what's the next one, and it has to sort of flow smoothly and create a greater picture in the reader's mind. So that's what I was working hard to achieve. So it was really pleasing to see that you guys picked up on that and saw it as a feature of the book. So thanks for that.
How would you describe Red Harvest Moon to someone who's not familiar with it?
Well, in a nutshell, I pitch it as it's the Seven Samurai, but with monsters. That's the elevator pitch for me. It's a small village under attack from this sort of external force. In this case, the ghouls of Urizen, and there's the wandering swordsman who comes to their aid somewhat reluctantly. So it's for me, it's I suppose an archetypal story. So we've seen that elsewhere. So I'm not claiming to have crafted an original story, but taking that archetype and then trying to do something a bit unusual with it and make a sort of modern fantasy. So that's the elevator pitch for Red Harvest Moon. It's Seven Samurai, but with monsters. But there's not Seven Samurai, obviously. But one thing that I have tried to emphasize, and another reviewer picked up this, is I suppose the sort of Japanese influence on my own writing. So another thing that I've sort of tried to keep in mind as I was writing it was it would look Western but feel Japanese in a way. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I tried to keep in mind. So obviously it's a sort of it's meant to be a familiar medieval setting. So there's a lot of detail about the sort of feudal village, the three field system, all that kind of thing, but with Japanese influences. So the religion that they have in Soren is based on Shinto, which is a Japanese faith. And I really like that. I think it works really well in a fantasy setting because it basically imbues everything with this sort of natural spirit. So trees have got this sort of magical presence, and streams and mountains, and everything is imbued with this sort of spiritual energy. So I thought that was really good to sort of borrow that as well. So I think I'm kind of rambling on a little bit about your question was how do you describe the book, but yeah, so that's a little bit of an idea of where my inspiration came from and what I was trying to achieve with the book.
So writing the first book, Red Harvest Moon, obviously, it took you almost 3 years, right? 2.5, you mentioned earlier. This second book, now that you somewhat have an audience and people ready for it, do you feel any kind of pressure, like to finish it earlier?
Yeah, I do. But it's good. It's good pressure. That's the beauty of it. It's great that there's people out there that have read the first one and they've said, I want to read the second one. This is great. Let's keep it going. But to get it right and to make it, for me to be happy with it, I need to give it a certain amount of time. So I don't think it'll take as long. I'm looking at hopefully having it out within a year. But it's as I say. So I have a full-time job. I've got 2 kids, and there's other things going on in my life. I'd love to just be able to sit down every day and write for 8 hours, but unfortunately, that's not the case at the moment. So the pressure, I suppose the pressure is I'm mainly feeling it myself. So I mainly want it to be a book that I can look back on and go, yeah, I did it as well as I possibly could have. And I feel that way about Red Harvest Moon. I think maybe I could have kept tweaking it, but I reached a certain point where I just thought it's probably about as good as I'm going to get it. Let's put it out there. And it's been great to have reader feedback and people saying, look, I'm really looking forward to the next one. A lot of people have talked about how they're interested in the world and, what's beyond the borders and so forth, and some interest in some other cultures and so forth. A lot of that stuff is fleshed out, and the second novel is all about just expanding it a little bit more. So I'm sort of billing it as epic fantasy. A few people have sort of commented that it's the story's only set over a day, and the stakes are fairly small. So it's all within one village, and again that was intentional. But now I'm ready to sort of start expanding the borders, so to speak, and making a little bit more epic as we go along. And hopefully the next one's going to be a little bit longer as well. So
yeah, it was very short for a first book. That was a good length, but I'm a big fan, and I wish it was a little bit longer. But I believe when it's a first book, you gave each character enough room to be to develop throughout the book, especially the main character. Why did you decide to keep him so mysterious in the beginning, and as the story progressed, we learn more about him? Was that intentional in the beginning, or did you want him to be like a little mysterious?
Well, you're aiming for dark and brooding, so you can't give everything away on the first couple of pages. Yeah, I think it's partly my own learning about Ren, the main character, learning about his own background as I'm writing it, and that my own sort of getting to know this guy process sort of comes through in the book as well. And he's definitely not the sort of character that you want everything up on the surface, but you know at first glance that there's still waters run deep, so to speak, with Ren. So and there's more to come. So I've got the backstory for the main character and for the other characters as well, and it's been fully intentional just to sort of package it out within some within the first novel, and then we build on it in the next novel, etc. So there's things that Ren doesn't know about his own life that he's going to discover as the journey continues.
Yeah, I was a fan of the size of the book. It was enough to tell a story and to get to know the world and the characters in it, but it wasn't so much that it was overwhelming. So I thought that was nice, that it wasn't too much. It was enough to where it was a nice taste and you want more.
Yeah.
So keep us coming back.
Yeah, cheers. So I'm actually a fan of shorter books myself. So I've got a pretty short attention span. So I understand within the genre, you get a lot of books that are 600-700 pages long, and I'm really daunted by that. So
Yeah.
I know, Raoul, you read something like 18 books last week, but for me that'd be
Yeah.
I would probably read about 10 books in a year. So I quite like to be able to pick up a book that's 250 pages long and just be immersed and, be able to not feel like, oh my God, I'm bogged down in the middle and I've still got 300 pages to go. So it was kind of intentional, and it's a little bit of an experiment to see how people would respond, because I feel that might be a little bit of a niche market for that kind of thing. So something that's not light in terms of light and fluffy, but something that's a bit easier to get into. And as you described earlier, Steve, so the idea is it's meant to just be immersive. You're in the moment when you're reading the story, and we're not jumping back to 150 years ago this happened, and this kingdom and that house and that person and blah blah blah. It's meant to be kind of just a flow of images, and you're just along for the ride.
Yeah.
So that's all intentional. I would like to expand on that. So I'm thinking like 350 pages would be the perfect page count for that.
Sounds all right.
Another question. Okay, so my favorite part in the book was Crim's sense of humor. Was when you first created that character, did you want well, how can I phrase this correctly? Because there's a big contrast between Ren and Crimp, right?
Yeah.
I believe like Ren is more serious and Crimp is like funny. He has like this sense of humor. Was that intentional, like to have the contrast between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's I suppose it's good to have that kind of buddy cop dynamic where you've got the straight guy and then you've got the wise ass sort of cracking jokes all the way through.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going for. So it's it's great that you guys sort of found it funny, because it's difficult to know. It's difficult to know if I write a joke a year and a half ago whether or not it's gonna land. So yes, intentional.
There was definitely some good comedic moments in the book that
Thank you.
just I had to stop for a minute and laugh because there's some funny moments.
Yes, it's a bit tricky to balance because there's death and destruction all around, and then you've got this guy cracking jokes. But I think that it's something that the modern reader likes and almost expects to have a little bit of levity coming through the page as well. So,
writing a fantasy book, was it important to you to have to make it accessible for more, like, did you make an effort to tone down the violence or the language or anything like that in a way to make it more accessible for a larger amount of people?
No, it's violence is an interesting question because I know that there's a bit of an emergence of this new genre, grimdark, and that just seems to be sort of no holds barred. I do have my own personal limits about what I would put into a story, but I think that what I'm comfortable with is actually more violent than what I would think that I would be comfortable with. So in my own real life, I'm a pacifist and non-violent and would run from a fight. But I think that in a story, I quite like a little bit of violence. I suppose it's just adds to the drama and the tension. But I didn't really make an effort to tone anything down. But I did have an idea that it's not a story for children, and it's not intended to be young adult either. I'm sure 15-year-old me would have loved to have read something like this, but it's not a story for kids. So my own children are banned from reading it at the moment. But there's limits to it. I know reading like Michael Fletcher, for example, or even Joe Abercrombie or someone like that. They're another level up above from me. But when I said to my partner, "Oh, what book are you up? What part of the when she was reading it? What part of the book are you up to?" And she said, "I'm up to the part where the guy gets his eye scooped out with a spoon." And I thought, that's pretty full on. So I don't know.
That was a standout.
Yeah. It is memorable for sure.
Yeah.
It was great.
When it comes to, sorry, were you gonna say?
No, go ahead, bro.
When it comes to the villains in this story, why did you choose? Why did you put two of them? And like I didn't even. I believe, like when I started reading this, I think you pronounce his name Kron. Kron?
Yeah, I say Kron. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't believe that he was the villain at first. I believe his name is Sosa. Sosa. Yeah, I thought he was the main villain the whole time, and I thought that maybe Kron was just like one of his like victims, like he was just dragging him along to be like the muscle. So when we learn later, obviously this is a little bit of spoiler, that Kron is actually like very dead. Like he's very deadly. He's very he was like pretty much the brains behind it all, but just it was the talisman that he was using, right, to control him.
Yeah, it's kind of the idea is that the ghouls and Krond have this black blood, which is it's sort of basically their so it sort of ties in with their nervous system. So essentially the ghouls and the blood sun. So Krond is a blood sun, so he's sort of like a lucid or intelligent ghoul essentially. But they're under the thrall of the adept, who are like the sorcerers of Urizen. But the sort of the backstory would be that Charnak, who is the Dark Lord, left behind this sort of science, technology, magic that the adept are kind of exploiting. So they use that to, I suppose, manufacture this army that they can then use for their own ends. And so Krond is devout. So he's like a sort of zealot. He believes in the will of Charnak and his ultimate desire to, destroy the universe. But whether or not the adept and people like Zoso are really on the same page with that is not quite known. So are they just exploiting this sort of left behind magic and technology? So that's where I suppose with the two villains, they're in conflict. So Krond is definitely very zealous, and he's engaged on this almost religious mission to destroy. And Zoso he's on a sort of a military mission. He's got these military objectives that he wants to achieve, and he's it's not all about they're not exactly on the same page with it. So that's where the sort of conflict lies. So who is the main villain? I'd probably say that Krond would be the major antagonist because he's matched up with Ren in many ways. So where Ren is struggling with this idea of being a loyal knife, which is like a knight from his culture, and he's sort of pushing against that. Krond is, I suppose, a bit similar to that because he's the blood son. So they're kind of like the knights of that culture. So so there's meant to be that parallel between them, which is why I think that Ren and Krond are so, I don't know, fascinated by one another and determined to encounter one another and test their skills against each other. So that would make him the main antagonist in that case.
And I liked that the villain wasn't. We didn't know everything about the villain. We still don't know everything about the villain and everything. So I like that there was enough to set the table, but there wasn't so much to where we knew everything right away. So that's another part that I really enjoyed. And I want to know more about them, where they came from, the whole backstory. So I'm anxious to learn more about them.
Yeah, that's great. I'm anxious to make up more stuff about them.
Yeah. When did you want to start? When did you decide to write a novel and to get it out there in the world?
Well, I've basically always wanted to be a writer and have always written. So I think most writers that have a similar kind of life story where I've always enjoyed writing and have always, if I've ever written something and shared it with some of them, usually got a positive response. So it's something that I enjoy doing. And I spent a lot of time in my early years writing short stories. So I wrote a lot of short stories and sort of sought publication in magazines. And that process was great to sort of, I suppose, develop my skills and find out what worked and what didn't. You face a lot of rejection when you sort of play that game. So I spent a lot of time writing and then, looking at these rejection slips and getting feedback from editors and thinking, what am I doing wrong? Slowly but surely getting some acceptances for some short stories. So after a while, I started to think, well, I think I might be onto the general process here. Let's try a novel. I actually wrote a novel, my first attempt at a novel about 10 or so years ago. And it was a fantasy novel. And it was around the idea of like a sort of thief in a fantasy setting. And the idea was going to be like, Ocean's 11, but in a fantasy world. And I thought no one's done that before. That's pretty cool. And then, Locke Lamora came out and a few other things. And I thought, okay, I think, this is something. But I couldn't really bring it in for a landing. I think it was because it was my first one. I kind of got fairly quite bogged down with writing it. So I put that one on the shelf and then had another go. So I actually have written another novel and published another one. I've got a copy of it here. This is called 1001 Monsters You Must Slay Before You Die. And again, this is light too. This is only 160 pages. So I think that maybe I just write short books, but so that I wrote that kind of in response to this idea. I just kept seeing the same sort of stories over and over again. And I thought, I'm going to try and write something that's different. So the main character is 83 years old. He's an old man. He's almost at the end of his life, but he's just like this crazy survivor in this apocalyptic scenario. And rather than, a story with the hero cycle with the call to adventure, etc. There's none of that. It's just a sort of series of crazy events. I had a great time writing it, and I just thought, I'm going to put it out. And I knew that it wasn't going to get picked up by a publisher, so I didn't even bother sending it off to a publisher. There's no way they're going to publish this. Anyone's going to publish this because it's completely out of left field. It's if you like my sense of humor, you probably like this book because it's more kind of your Terry Pratchett, Douglas Adams style humor, basically. So I just tried to sort of crack as many stupid jokes as I could and put this character in as many. He's a complete coward. He's always hiding under a desk when the action's going down, and I thought it was hilarious. I had a great time writing it. I thought I'll put it out there, and it did pretty well in sort of self-pub circles, I suppose you'd say, but didn't like The World on Fire. So after I wrote that, I thought, okay, so that was fun, but I'm not sure if I want to go back to The Well on that one. I could possibly write another book in that world. I still might. And then I just thought, well, I want to write something that will be a bit more likely to find an audience. So I sort of come back to that idea of what do people want to read? And so I essentially just thought, I just write down everything that I am interested in as a reader and everything that I wanted to write, and basically just put a circle around a few things that I wanted to focus on. And that was, I've always wanted to write a fantasy novel, like an epic fantasy novel. So I grew up reading Tolkien and loving it. But I also have that interest in sort of Akira Kurosawa sort of stuff. And then, so I just sort of brought all that together and thought, this is it. And just really focused on that. So it was good to be able to sort of reach that point in my development where, and I suppose my writing skills have probably improved a little bit over the years as well, where everything just sort of came together and clicked for me. And now that I've got Red Harvest Moon there, and it's sort of, for me, that's hopefully they're going to be the cornerstone for the next few years of my writing, where, there'll be the series coming out, and, I want to sort of build my name around that series. Mm-hmm. If people want to come back to 1001 Monsters You Must Slay Before You Die, I have sold a couple of extra copies on the back of Red Harvest Moon, so it's kind of fun to think of people discovering that and having a read. Yeah, that's where that come from.
I'll be reading that one.
Give it a go.
Yeah, give it a go. I can't do 27 books in a week like Raoul can, but I'll get through.
I thought it was my favorite read. Okay, what was the question? I had a question. Let me think of it before it slips. Okay, let's see. We're talking about the book.
So while Raoul's thinking of his question, Miles, what type of books do you like to read? Do you have any favorites?
Yeah, I wish I could read faster, but I really like fantasy, but I don't exclusively read fantasy novels. I'd say that I grew up reading Tolkien, as I said, mm-hmm. And that was what blew my mind as a youngster and made me go, I love fantasy, I love writing, etc. I read a lot of fighting fantasy game books. I don't know if you guys know those. They're sort of like a choose your own adventure, but more violent. Yeah. And I love those. But growing up, because I'm from a small country town in Australia, so we're a long way away from the rest of the world, so to speak. So when I was growing up, I would just grab anything that I could get my hands on, anything in the library or in the bookshop that looked vaguely like a fantasy or a science fiction. I would read it. So I'd be, at high school, I'd be reading Asimov and Dune and all this sort of stuff. And now with access to everything and anything. But having said that, at university, I studied literature as well. So I've read a lot of non-genre stuff. So a book that I read recently that I really enjoyed was Moby Dick. So I read that a couple of years ago, and it's a fantastic read. So I've read Anna Karenina recently, which was a great book. So I don't just stick to fantasy. I feel like if I did, my writing would probably suffer. I feel like that if you're just in that sort of silo of I'm just reading fantasy. I also love, so I lived in Japan for a couple of years, so I love anime and manga as well. I'm not sort of obsessed with it like some people, but I really love Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Have you guys read that book? Or
no, I haven't.
It's I put it on the same shelf as Lord of the Rings. So it's for me, it's epic fantasy. It's one of the best. I've actually got it here. I'll see if I can pull it out. It's one of the best books I've ever read, and here it is. So you can see here Nausicaa. It's 2 volumes, and it's a 2-volume manga. If I can get that in there. Nice. And it's drawn and written by Hayao Miyazaki, who you might know from anime fame. So he did Howl's Moving Castle and Princess Mononoke and all those sort of books. So this is an anime. So I know you guys are getting into graphic novels a bit now. So this is an amazing work of art because this is 2 volumes. This is just one of them, and Hayao Miyazaki wrote and drew the entire thing over, decades. So it's the level of detail is incredible. So people talk about world building. This is, for me, this is the big kahuna of world building. This is on the same shelf as the Lord of the Rings. If you like fantasy, I sound like a book tutor. If you really like fantasy, you love your fantasy, you love your world building. You got to get into Nausicaa. It's an incredible read, and it's my recommendation.
I'm writing that down.
I remember my question, but you kind of somewhat answered it with that what you were just mentioning right now, because we're bookkeepers, so we read a lot of books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you start to figure out like the formula, like what they're going with or what's gonna happen, and a lot of books become predictable, like very.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I have to applaud you because the whole time I didn't know what was gonna happen, which was really good. And I think you said it because you will read different genres. I believe a lot of these writers stick to just reading one and just kind of drawing from that source. So keep doing that. I don't think that was a question because you pretty much answered it. But yeah, I thank you for that because I was reaching a reading slump, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna have to pause this for a good minute. But Steve mentioned it, picked it up, loved it, and now we're back. We're rolling with all those books.
Wonderful.
When you started to write Red Harvest Moon, did plot or characters come first? Did you kind of plot that out, or did it just kind of evolve on its own?
I think I've just cycled back and forth between the two. So character comes from plot comes from character. I wanted to tell. I probably started with that idea of, watching Kurosawa and thinking to myself, I want to have, I want swords. I want sword fights. I'm going to need a guy with a sword. And I love that sort of the idea of this, mysterious wandering swordsman going from village to village, drinking a cup of tea and looking a bit mysterious. And then a fight breaks out and he kicks ass. And, I love it. So that's where I wanted to go from. And then everything just sort of built around that. So, yeah, they just cycle backwards and forwards and setting as well. So constantly thinking about where are we? Where can I put this in? What's a cool environment where I can have something happen? So wherever there's a jewel, I want the sort of setting to kind of be awesome as well. So I think about the final scene in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where there's 3 of them having a jewel, and they're in that really cool circular space at the gravesite, and it's like it's a great conclusion to the movie. So I just constantly cycled between the 3. But I'd say with Red Harvest Moon, probably I would have had the idea for the story first, and then everything else sort of filled in from there. Yeah.
Speaking about characters, is there any characters in this book that almost didn't make the final cut?
Well, that's a good question.
That was a good one.
No, I don't. I haven't. It's not really the way I would think about it. I would say. I did cut. Did cut a couple of characters, but I think that the main characters are there out of necessity, and peripheral characters are there to sort of supply information about the world or balance out the plot, and also to sort of flesh out the themes. So what's happening with the villagers? The villagers have got their own little conflicts going on, and that's meant to sort of balance out, what's going on in the main characters as well. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think of a sort of writing a story and then going, you know what, I don't like you anymore. You cut, like a basketball coach or something like that. But no. But I think I've done that in the past where I've written a story and gone, this guy's not working out. I'm going to have to cut him. I'm going to have to put him on the bench.
Are there any side characters that you've considered writing a spin-off story on?
I want to sort of flesh out Crimp's backstory a little bit more. So I had a few scenes written that talked more about how Ren and Crimp met. But I thought with the balance of the story, I could only really go into Ren's backstory, and I'll save those ideas for another day. And because it sort of opens up another part of the world, it was going to take a while to develop. So I'll shelve that for a future novel. So there is a prequel novella. I'm not sure if you're aware that happens the day before. So it tells the story of Droon. So I don't know if your viewers know, but there's another character in the story called Droon who's he's a hunter. He's a wild man. And so there's a prequel novella. It's about 40 pages long that just basically flows directly into the main novel. So it's probably a good entry point for if there's any viewers that are sort of thinking about giving it a go. It's free on my website. So there's a plug. It's called Bane of Wolves, and it's about 40 pages. And I had a really great time writing that as well. So I really enjoy writing Droon as well. So he's got a bit of a different character arc to Ren, whereas Ren's sort of caught up with this, struggling with this idea of where does he fit into the world? How can I be a knight or some sort of heroic figure when I've been exiled by my own country? Whereas Droon is more, he's got this conflict with the woman that he loves, and she's having a baby and all this sort of stuff. So a little bit more small scale. So there was that. I would like to sort of, I've had a few ideas here and there for scenes that could stand alone, but it's a process of deciding whether or not that scene will go into a novel in the future. So because the novel, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure at this point, like it could go in lots of different directions, and a scene that might stand on its own might actually work really well in the novel. So yeah, I suppose kinda is my answer.
Yeah. Are there any tricks that you used or anything that you practiced writing action scenes? Was that because a lot of they seem really hard to write? Is there anything that you've practiced or any tricks that you use to write action scenes?
So I'm hopeless at violence personally. I did a little bit of martial arts when I was younger, a bit of Taekwondo and a bit of Aikido. So when I was in Japan, I studied Aikido a little bit. And when I was a kid, I used to beg my dad to let me go and do judo, but he was like, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to break your neck. So I've always been attracted to sort of Japanese martial arts. And I also really love HEMA, which is historical European martial arts. And I think that if I had written this book 20 years ago, I would have been in trouble because it's so great to be able to have the internet, basically. So there's all these historical documents about longsword fighting techniques that are dating back hundreds of years that are up free on the internet and you can just browse and look at. And then there's all these sorts of information you can get from that. And there's a lot of people on YouTube that are, demonstrating different fighting techniques. There's a lot of really cool YouTube channels where people are testing out, will this crossbow bolt pierce this type of armor? It's amazing that for the modern fantasy author, it's just, I just think to myself, okay, if Crimp shot someone in the head and they're wearing a helmet, would that crossbow bolt go through? Would it glance off the helmet? What are the chances? You know what I mean? So, and then I can just look it up on YouTube and there's some guy with a pig wearing a helmet and he's like, okay, today I'm going to shoot a crossbow bolt at this pig and see if it's all there. But in terms of the actual moves, my hope with Ren was that, because he's like a longsword master, so for me to pull that off, I'm going to have to do a lot of research into longsword. So, and I'm sure that there'd be longsword nerds out there that'd find fault with what I've got, but I've done the best I could. And there's a lot of me looking at sword masters on YouTube demonstrating different holds and different guards and so forth. And part of that is sort of pivotal to the fights as well. So without giving anything away, some of the sort of training that Ren does as a youngster sort of comes into play throughout. So I sort of showed him learning moves or practicing moves as a young person that then play out in the novel. And those are moves that I've watched people demonstrating on YouTube and then tried to write, but do it in such a way that it's not jarring or, doesn't take you out of the flow of the story. There's a lot of German terminology that you can't use basically because German is not a language in my fantasy world. So that my main technique is just to research and to think about a reader that loves longsword and hope to satisfy them. Also, a lot of sort of standing up and holding a broomstick in my lounge room and what would that look like? And just the final duel, Ren uses a move, and I must have just practiced it myself over and over again. Is this going to work? Would this work? So I hope it does. I don't know. So that's my secret, is just research and get a broom and practice, I suppose. I don't know.
So speaking of spoilers, we wanted to set aside a little bit of time to ask some spoilery questions. We don't want to ruin the story for anyone who wants to read it. So we had some spoilery questions for you.
Hit me.
Did you want to go first?
Go ahead. Yeah, you can go first.
Oh, but real quick before the spoiler talk, just one last question.
Sure.
It was about the internet. Are you overwhelmed by the fact that we don't even live in the same country as you, but your book reached us? We live in two separate states, by the way. So with the power of the internet, does it feel overwhelming or do you feel like it's more of a relief that it's given more of a chance?
I think it's fantastic. So if I was writing this book 20 years ago, I'd have to print off 200 copies. I'd sell 5 to my mum and 2 to my brother, and they'd be sitting in the shed gathering dust. So it's fantastic. The technology we have today is amazing. I can meet you guys, over the internet, have a conversation with you. It's miraculous. And the other amazing thing I find is that with print on demand, so I can upload my book to Amazon and someone in England can press a button and Amazon will print off 1 copy of it and send it to them. So it's completely efficient and it's fantastic. The only problem is, I would say, with the technology is that it kind of gets into your head, constantly checking the different platforms and checking the different stats and so forth. The hard part is just to be able to go, I need to just forget about that and just give myself a couple of hours to sit down and write. So that's the hard. Like it's so good to have this, and it's so great to be able to meet you guys over the internet. And thank you so much for your support and boosting the book. I really do appreciate it. It's been great. But yeah, so it's a miraculous technology, and I'm very grateful for it. So yeah, absolutely.
Good question. Raul, go ahead. You have a spoiler question?
Okay. So when it comes to
so spoilers ahead for everyone.
Yes. Well, yeah.
I'll add tags to the video, but just a heads up. Spoiler tag real quick. So when it comes to a lot of the deaths in this book, they were very emotional. Was that something you were aiming for in the beginning, or because a lot of these deaths, they had a purpose, like they happened for a reason? Was that your intention from the beginning, or that just by coincidence it happens?
I think it's a fair bit of discovery. So as I'm writing the story, I'm discovering these characters, and then discovering that they're going to die, and then discovering that that's upsetting. So, but whenever you're trying to write something, I suppose you want to have some sort of emotional component to it. So if someone's dying, then you have to try to make it. There's a scene where one person dies in his best friend's arms, and that's going to be emotional. And the hard part is writing that in such a way that it's not thinking of the sort of Vietnam movie where I'm cold, Johnny, that kind of things. I'm gonna get you out, man. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
That
But,
was a really sad scene that you wrote.
Thank you. Yeah, I was aiming for sad.
I think I shed a tear or two. I did. For a fact, they did with that. Pretty sure because it was so sad. That's why I had to ask you about that. That if it was so, you did it. Because we were talking about spoilers. Should we give away who it is, or do you guys?
Yeah, we're full spoilers.
Yes.
Well, I think that there's one of the chapter titles actually mentions the name of the character that gets.
Yeah, that he dies.
Yeah, the death of
So
it was
yeah,
unexpected too.
I built spoilers into my own table of contents. So
yeah.
I have another question. So when it comes to Ren and his when it comes to Ren and his father, obviously everybody, it's a very universal thing that you don't sometimes agree with your parent, or you don't understand the reasoning behind what they do, because we find out later on that Ren's father pretty much saved his life because he was going to get murdered. He was going to get killed, right? Correct? Am I wrong?
yeah.
Yes. Okay. Cool. There's another bit in that part that made me shed a tear. It's a beautiful quote. I don't know if you thought about it yourself, but it's so good. It said, "You never needed my approval. You're my son. I am forever bound to you by this." Something about that just seems so reassuring. That's what I mentioned in my review. That's the bit that I was talking about. Like something because Ren, I feel like he didn't understand where his dad was coming from. And did you come up with that yourself? What inspired that? It was so, I was like, did his dad tell him this? Did your father tell you?
No,
it was so beautiful.
Thank you. No, I did. I came up with that myself. But I suppose it's just from having a good relationship with my own dad. And, I think as you grow up, you sort of get told that you need to do things that are, if you do things well, then you get approval. So I think that the problem with Ren is he's the son of a swords master. So he's driven to master that to win his father's approval. And it only really dawns on him too late almost that that's not what it's about for his dad. And his father's not able to convince him of that for a long time. So, so I think that's having that sort of slowly unravel as the novel progresses in flashback. It was a bit tricky to kind of balance that up because it's like how much flashback do you put in and where do you put it in, and how do you make that a genuine story as well. So I was pretty happy with how it worked out. And, not so much a spoiler, but just a sort of hint about what will happen in the future. So there's more to that whole story that needs to be revealed as we go along. So as I say, Ren doesn't know the whole picture because he gets exiled and then things happen that he's going to experience further pain from. So
is insane. So is his father more prominent in the second book? Are we going to see more?
Look, Raul. No, that'd be telling.
Don't be getting greedy.
Yeah, don't be getting greedy.
You gotta pick the book up and read it, Raul.
Yeah, I'll wait. I'll give you a year. It's fine.
Thank you. Yeah. Give me 1 year. One year.
1 solid year. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And your YouTube channel needs to, explode as well. So
yeah, we need to.
I know you guys are going to start blowing up now, so we're in this together. We'll sit down again in a year's time, okay?
Yeah.
For sure.
We'll talk book 2.
Steve, did you have another question? I have one, but do you want to go?
There were about halfway through the book, I was convinced that Crimp wouldn't make it. Yeah. I didn't think he would. I thought he would sacrifice himself or
to save Ren.
He would go out in a satisfying way, but I didn't think he would make it. Did that ever cross your mind did you ever consider killing a character off and not decide to do it?
Yeah, I don't think I was ever going to kill Crimp off, but I think that the issue of who do you kill, it does crop up but a lot of the stuff, like going back to sort of things that I read or watched or enjoyed growing up, is stories that where it's sort of a belief in heroism or a belief in the sort of enduring power of the hero. And I know that sort of, George R. Martin has sort of turned that on its head a bit, where anyone can die. And I suppose that's fair. Anyone can die, but I don't mind keeping characters alive, so to speak, because I kind of, grew up reading books like, I don't know if you've heard of Tintin, for example, or so when you pick up a Tintin book, you know that Tintin's going to make it to the end, and you know that Captain Haddock's going to make it to the end. So so I would be reluctant, and I quite like Crimp, so I wouldn't want to kill him off because I'd miss him basically. So I wouldn't make any promises because I might reach it. I suppose it kind of comes down to the idea of the writer reaches a point where he's just a servant of the story. Sounds pretentious, but if I reach a point when I'm writing the story where it becomes apparent that somebody needs to die, then they're going to have to die. But yeah, so it's tricky.
Yeah. Raul, go ahead if you have a question.
Another thing, I'm telling you, this is why I took all this bit out from my review. Horik, is that correct? Horik?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
What do you mean when you said death is the food of life?
Yeah. So Horik is kind of this crazy druid figure whose his god is the god of death, but his take on it is that all life comes from death. So things that we find kind of repulsive or repugnant are actually necessary, and his cult kind of recognizes that. So it's I suppose a brave choice for a religion to sort of be focused on this idea of death. But the symbol of kind of sounds revolting when I think about it, but the symbol of his religion is the maggot. So the maggot is first on the scene when there's been a death. Yeah. The maggot arrives and gets the process of regeneration happening from the get-go. So so I thought that was just meant to be, for me, it was meant to be just a sort of a different take on a druid or a sort of shamanic figure who looks at the world completely different. So, Ren and Crimp especially is like, you're insane. What are you talking about? So, Horik's walking around with a skull mask, and he's got dead animals hanging off him, and he stinks. Yeah. And he's repellent, but he serves a function in his mind. He serves a function within the society because he acknowledges death and he sees it as the source of all life. So, that's where he came from. So, but when I wrote the scene, because I sort of tweaked him a little bit and made him even more repugnant at one point, and I wrote the scene where he's dripping with maggots and stinks, and I finished writing it, and I was like, oh, I actually felt nauseated. I was like, oh. So I thought, I must have done something right if I've actually made myself feel sick when I wrote that scene. So, yeah, I kind of like Horik. I think he's sort of like the crazy uncle that shows up and just, says what he wants and offends people and
goes away.
And then disappears, and he doesn't care. So he might show up again. I get the feeling that Horik is the sort of character that'll just sort of stagger in. They'll be sitting around the campfire one night, and they'll smell something weird, and in comes Horik again. So
yeah,
who knows?
I liked him. I thought it was nice.
Yeah. I don't believe you overused them, which was good, because characters like. Because I mentioned this, that I don't like when there's too many characters. You did a great job with adding enough characters that I knew who everyone was and like their relationships. So I was like, thank God certain characters were not like overused when like you don't really need them. But I did like how you brought him back during that but with the baker and his the baker's wife and the daughter. I like that bit. I was like, fuck them up. Come on, you got this. I loved it. Yeah. I pictured him to be like a I'm picturing him to be a man with just all this stuff on him. Was
Yeah.
he any kind of like supernatural creature? Or...
No, he's a man, but it's you don't know. You don't know. Is he young? Is he old?
Yeah.
You don't really know because he's got this mask of bone, like a skull mask, and he's covered in a shroud, and he's he's probably got a big stink cloud around him, so you don't want to get too close to find out basically to how old he is, but he is a man.
I was picturing like the Village, like those creatures from the Village. Is that the correct movie?
Yeah, that's
that
sort of vibe. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. He's meant to be a bit uncanny, so
Yeah.
Yeah. Miles, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Raul.
No, you go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, okay. So real quick, because I don't think we brought him up. Willem?
yeah.
Why did you kill him off so early?
Someone's got to die, man. Like
I was sorry. I feel so bad. I feel so bad. I was like, why is he killing him off so early? I feel like there could have been a little bit more with him, but you're right. So they made the danger real.
Yeah. So if you're going to have monsters that will eat you alive, someone's got to get eaten alive at some point. So, earlier on I said that I like to keep the idea of keeping people alive, but I suppose I restrict that to your main characters, and again, with the caveat that if the story dictates, then anyone can die. But Willen is so. For anyone that doesn't know, Willen is he's only in the first scene, and he and Droon are on the run from the ghouls when they meet the bandits in the woods, and it's it's essentially to highlight the danger. So he's there to demonstrate the urgency of the situation and the fact that their lives are in danger, and they only narrowly escape, and also to make Droon feel horribly guilty about his own choices in life. So, yeah. So, for death and pain is the answer to your question.
Well, I felt that.
Yeah.
I felt the pain.
Definitely. Well, Miles, I know you're a busy man, so I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to chat with us. And I know that with the time difference, it's hard for all the schedules to manage. So we appreciate you. Spending your morning with us.
No worries. Well, thank you very much for having me. And it is a bit weird. So it's Monday morning for me. So it's Sunday afternoon for you, I think. So
you're in the future.
Hello from the future. Thank you so much for your support, guys. It's been really great to get to know you and have this chat. And I look forward to staying in touch with you guys. And keep an eye out for book 2. I'll keep you updated on how it's going.
Well, anytime you want to chat, you just let us know, and we'll be happy to schedule something with you.
Great. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that.
And also, before we let you go, if someone wants to find your work and wants to know more about you, where can people find you online or follow your social media? Where is the best place for them to look?
I'm on Twitter, so if people want to, meet me and chat to me on Twitter, I'm there. Also, I have a website, mileshurt.com, and you can get Bane of Wolves, which is the 40-page prequel novella, free from there. Also, my books are on Amazon, basically, so you can get paperback or ebook editions of my books from Amazon.
And I will add all those links to the description box. So I hope more people get to read the book and experience it, because it's just a fun time. It's just a fun book. It's not too heavy. It's enough, and that's kind of the way I describe it to people. It's just a fun time. It's just a fun book. So
fun. With some death and destruction as well.
Yes,
yes.
There has to be some. Yeah, it has to be a little bit in there.
One more thing, final thing for those people who are watching. I will be doing a second paperback giveaway as soon as this video's up. So we put all that information in the forums. We'll set some rules up. Hopefully you win.
And I'll be giving away a paperback copy too. So there'll be 2 giveaways from this.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great book. So
we're going to get more people to read it. Yeah. So
thank you again, Miles.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and have a lovely rest of your day. Hope to speak again soon.
Let us know how it is in the future.
Yeah.
It's great.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you, Miles.
Thanks, guys. Good luck.
Okay.
See you later.
Bye bye.